Hello again, everybody. It is me, John. Thank you for joining me again on this edition of BrainScratch. We are going back to a topic. I think I have 4 other videos on this topic. You can find them in the description box below if you need to catch up or if you're not familiar with any aspects of this case. But this is the case of Kendrick Johnson. And I'm actually filming this the week of Halloween 2015. And on Halloween Day, it will be exactly 2 years since the Department of Justice launched an investigation into this case. For anyone that's not familiar with this case, Kendrick, seen in this picture behind me, was found in his high school gymnasium in a rolled up gym mat that was up on its end, and Kendrick somehow is upside down in that gym mat and apparently suffocated. There is some conjecture about the coroner's report. The family did an independent autopsy, and that autopsy, the results were completely different, saying that Kendrick had died of blunt force trauma, specifically from a hit to the side of his head. So what's interesting about this case is the original investigation only lasted 4 months, and now the Department of Justice has been looking at this case for 2 years. And if you're wondering if there's any sign of that changing anytime soon, we're going to be covering some recent developments on that front. To start off with, the first development was there's a family known as the Bell family. 2 of the brothers went to the high school, and Kendrick's family highly suspects that they had something to do with his demise and or the cover-up involved in making it look like this was an accidental death. And that family has received a lot of negative attention in terms of social media, and also Ebony magazine wound up writing pretty lengthy articles. They didn't use the family's real name, but apparently it was easy for local community members to determine who the articles were about, and those articles seemed to strongly implicate the family of being involved. The father of this family, Rick Bell, is actually an FBI agent, so that's part of what is generating this potential conspiracy angle on this case. The Bell family sued Ebony magazine. They filed a lawsuit for $5 million for defamation, and news that has just been released on this as of September 28th, 2015, the Bells have dropped the Ebony suit with plans to refile according to this article. Just off the top of my head, I find it very interesting that they dropped this suit. It was only 2 months before they dropped this suit that their homes were raided, all of their electronic devices were taken, and even in this article, if we scroll down to the bottom, this is from the Valdosta Daily Times. That's a local paper that does a lot of coverage on Kendrick's case, so if you want to catch up on that, you can check that out. I think some readers might assume that there might be some bias in this reporting. It seems to always be painted in a certain type of direction about this case. It doesn't seem very objective, let me just say, and these are not noted as opinion pieces, so that strikes me a little bit, but they do seem to report a lot of the facts. However, you might have to read through what feels like some opinionated text to get to that. Bryce Ladson is the attorney for the Bell family, and there's a quote from him here at the bottom. "Our clients have the right to dismiss their case and refile it within 6 months. They have elected to exercise that right and will refile the case in a state or federal court of competent jurisdiction and venue. They remain determined to clear their names of defamatory statements made by Fred Rosen and Johnson Publishing, LLC, in the 2013 to 2014 Ebony magazine articles, falsely blaming them for the alleged murder of Kendrick Johnson, as well as participating in the alleged massive conspiracy to cover up the murder." What I find interesting about that statement is, like I said, their names were actually not used in the articles, and Bryce here is clearly saying that they need to clear their names, which I think it's going to be a tough case to try to deal with First Amendment rights and the author's right to write his opinion about what he thinks might have happened in this case, especially if it was posted as an opinion piece. And I think that there's something very telling about this 6-month time frame. As a matter of fact, keep that in mind because it might come up again later in this episode. However, Bryce is not telling us here what motivated the family to cause this delay. Why would you delay this lawsuit that's already ongoing? I mean, admittedly, they are named in another lawsuit that Kendrick's family has filed, a $100 million lawsuit, and they're part of that case as well. So I'm just not sure of the timing of this, and like I said, this isn't, at least for me, this doesn't give us a very clear understanding of what has motivated the family to drop the suit against Ebony. Now, someone has been dropped from the Kendrick Johnson's family's lawsuit, the GBI Workers, and that is essentially any employees of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I believe there was 9 of them named, if I remember correctly, including the coroner that conducted the autopsy. The GBI is obviously a state investigation entity, and they were on site. They processed the crime scene, and they worked with the local sheriff's department in this case. So if there is some type of conspiracy, it's highly likely that some element of that would have touched the GBI. And quite honestly, I'm a little surprised that they dismissed them from this case, especially with the difference of opinion in terms of the autopsy report and the fact that the medical examiner that conducted the autopsy is part of the GBI, so she has been dismissed, even though the Johnson family has evidence that directly counters her findings. So I don't know if they might still call her to testify, and I'm not sure that this will really absolve her of any fallout if she does testify and is found to be incorrect in this case, or potentially part of some type of cover-up around this information. Interesting kind of side related to it. This is from myajc.com. Embarrassed medical examiner abruptly retires. And here's a picture of Dr. Chris Sperry, and he basically works in Georgia, and he is over the other medical examiners in the GBI. He abruptly retired because he was busted essentially for faking time cards while he was conducting outside work. He is now kind of a witness that could be hired by attorneys for their cases. He can go and testify on other people's behalf. And apparently he was doing that work while he was still clocking in hours for his regular job at the GBI. He claims he makes a lot more money in that outside work, and most medical examiners seem to process about 300 autopsies per person, and his numbers were getting down closer to about 200. What's interesting about this is normally faking time records like that could be punishable by prison time, and of course he doesn't get slapped with that. They are just going to deduct pay from him. They're going to accept his resignation early. They've put him on leave even though his resignation hasn't started yet, and essentially they're going to dock his vacation time. But there are a lot of people, particularly in the comments here, that think that he should be facing stiffer penalties than that for essentially screwing over a government system, which I think I kind of agree with. What's so interesting about Dr. Chris Sperry? Sperry defended his office's ruling that the death of Kendrick Johnson, a teenager from Valdosta whose body was found in a rolled up wrestling mat, was accidental. So he does directly touch this case, and here we at least can prove that someone in that department may not be doing their job exactly to spec. Does that say that the medical examiner was false? No, not necessarily at all. But it does speak to possible types of corruption that go on in these big administrations. And like in this story, the corruption doesn't end just when they bust this guy. Obviously, he's getting off pretty easy just losing some vacation days. So the administration that's managing him seems like there might be a vein of corruption that could potentially go through that as well. In case you can't tell, I highly distrust large administrations to do things right. They most typically, in my experience, seem to do what is easy and what is most convenient for them to resume collecting their paycheck, as exactly was the case here, even though he was getting paid twice as much for his outside work. This is from CBSNews.com. Feds seek to pause civil lawsuit in Georgia gym mat death. Remember that 6-month time frame that I asked you to remember earlier about the Bell family holding off their lawsuit? Well, essentially, the Department of Justice has now contacted the judge and filed motions on the Kendrick Johnson lawsuit to delay that lawsuit for 6 months, specifically to delay the discovery process. And the pretense around that is that the Kendrick Johnson lawsuit, them investigating right now at this time, might impede or potentially damage the investigation that the DOJ is doing. So, I've spoken to a lot of people that are on both sides of the fence in this case, and a lot of people were making the assumption that the DOJ was waiting to see what happens in the civil lawsuit. We now know that that's not the case. Some people are making the assumption that the DOJ is really not doing much and not active in this case. And as of last July, when they started executing their search warrants, I think that perception has changed a bit. But this is yet another indicator that the DOJ is active. They are investigating this. It is ongoing. And I find it pretty interesting that they're asking for a 6-month window here. And that seems to mirror what the Bell family has just noted, that they are taking a 6-month break from their lawsuit and then plan to refile. Is that just a coincidence? Quite possibly. Is there something else to it? It has to make you think. I mean, if you're looking at these events from the outside, you could start to assume that some information is breaking loose, that potentially the Bell family attorney has heard something that has changed his mind about the viability of the Ebony lawsuit. There's all kinds of different ways to look at this. Maybe they don't want to take on the Ebony lawsuit because they want to focus on defending themselves in the Kendrick Johnson lawsuit. There are many different ways to look at these events. But there's clearly a lot of motion around this case. What is also interesting about this stay is the judge in Kendrick's case, I believe it's Judge Porter, had filed a motion to essentially finish the discovery phase of this case, basically where they're finding all their information and bringing it in for each legal party to review, by November 16th. And obviously this motion from the DOJ is going to impact that because now the legal teams are supposed to stop. That being said, the judge has not yet stopped what is going on right now, which is KJ's parents are being deposed despite DOJ objections. Basically, they're going through a round of questioning that is being videotaped. This is their official deposition. This will probably be used in court, or certain parts of it. And this is also a discovery phase for the defense, so they can get a better understanding of what KJ's parents might know or might think about this case and what they're going to be facing once it actually goes to trial. So apparently Judge Porter has not halted this deposition. He is waiting to rule on the motions that have been filed from the DOJ, and we don't know what the answer to that is yet. Supposedly he's thinking about it this week or into next week, and then we will have an official conclusion on that. I'm not sure about how these jurisdictions work, but this is a superior court case, and this is the Department of Justice, and I don't know which fish is bigger or can really win in this. And finally, one other piece of Kendrick Johnson news. This is KJ in a new Usher music video. This music video is for a song called Chains. And there is a little bit of controversy around KJ appearing here, and specifically what is worded here. And let me read it for you real quick. Kendrick was found dead in his high school gym. Hours of surveillance camera footage from the gym has since mysteriously disappeared. No one has ever been charged. And the controversy is around that statement that the surveillance camera footage has mysteriously disappeared. Some people allege that it never existed, and I have to kind of agree that the way that's worded is just a little sloppy and could have probably been worded a bit better and still gotten that point across. The main issue with the gym is Kendrick was in an area that had cameras, and for some reason the cameras failed to pick up whatever happened to him for him to wind up in that gym mat. Now, if you look into this, there are experts that have looked at the video footage. Some of them say that they can't tell from the copies they've been given, but if they looked at the original hard drives, they would be able to determine if there are indeed gaps that were cut out of the video footage. Other people are alleging that no, this video footage was shot this way because there are motion detection sensors on the cameras and they were not detecting motion, so they cut out. What's strange about that is in some of the footage you can see Kendrick running in the gym, and it's like the camera cuts on while he's in the middle of the frame. Essentially, he had to run from this side all the way to this side, and for some reason it's missing this whole first piece. So if nothing else, it would appear that the surveillance system that they're using is probably flawed in some way, especially if it's catching motion that late. And also there was one camera in particular that was shooting the corner with the gym mats where Kendrick was, and he should not have been completely out of frame there. So for me personally, I would not be trusting those motion sensors so much. And of course, this is a public school. A lot of families trust their children to be safe there. We need to make sure that those systems kind of work properly, so that is the case. And in this case, even the most basic or deep understanding of what's going on with these camera systems, there was some type of failure. Some people say that the camera was hit by a basketball and that knocked it in a direction where the image was fuzzy and it was too fuzzy for the motion sensor to kick on. So I just wanted to get that out there as well. But Usher's video is making a bit of an assumption. It's not a horrible assumption. There was a ton of news coverage around this. CNN was all over this case for a very long time. They actually are participating in the court case with the Johnson family. So I can understand why this potential misunderstanding is in there. But quite honestly, we don't know the truth. This thing could be spot on, and we just don't know it for a fact yet. I don't believe that anyone outside of the local authorities has access to those original hard drives. And like I said, the expert said he would need to access those hard drives specifically to know if this footage was indeed mysteriously disappeared, as opposed to just missing. And that's kind of what I wish. I wish this phrase was written so that it was just the footage of what happened to Kendrick, even though he was in a gym that had cameras, is missing. That being said, I really think you should check out Chains. It's definitely speaking to what a lot of people are feeling in this time frame. I don't know if it's officially aligned with the Black Lives Matter movement, but it's definitely a piece of art that reflects that movement and that emotion that a lot of people are feeling, that there are a lot of questionable African American deaths. And it's not, they also go into other minorities in this video as well. But I will have a link for it in the description box below. And in any case, I think it's kind of cool that Usher is at least keeping a level of awareness raised around this case. As you guys know, that's a lot of the reason why I do BrainScratch, because there are certain cases that we should not forget about and certain mysteries that we shouldn't just let disappear into the ether of the past. I think this is definitely one of those cases. And this trial will proceed at one time or another, and I'm hoping that we will learn a lot more about potentially what happened to KJ, and if that implicates the Bell family or if that finally sets them free and clear. I think everyone involved is going to breathe a heavy sigh of relief when we finally come to that judgment, and hopefully there'll be a lot less back and forth from very emotionally charged parties. This topic, if you want to get into a fight on Twitter quickly, just use the hashtag Kendrick Johnson and say anything, and someone will come at you for it for some reason. It is a extremely emotional topic, no doubt. But that being said, of course, I'm going to ask all of you to please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Please respect each other's opinion. I've been very fortunate that the BrainScratch fan base has been very good about respecting the rights for others to have opinions different than them. Quite honestly, 99% of the time, you guys rock in those comments, and I really appreciate it. So I wanted to thank you for that again. Outside of all that, Once again, I've just got to say it, my heart goes out to the Johnson family. This is a horrible loss, regardless of what's happened. They are a family that's in pain, and it's hard to really let them grieve with the questions that they have about potentially what happened to Kendrick. And I hope one way or another, going through this process will give them ultimately the closure and some level of peace. And I personally am very curious as to why this DOJ investigation is taking too long. It's almost unfair in one way. However, you have to consider the fact that it's taken that long because it really needed that amount of attention, or they're processing evidence and it's taking that amount of time. And when you start thinking about that stuff, it makes that initial 4-month investigation look like maybe it was a little too quick. Maybe there was some considerations that weren't really fleshed out or researched properly, and now you've got another government body that's coming in and trying to clean up the mess. So anyway, I hope you all are having a great week. Thank you so much for spending more time with me on BrainScratch, and I will see you again next week on the Geek and Dorks channel. Take care, everybody.